Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the Tribal Council podcast.
We're on this podcast, Survivor Represents Our Life.
And when it's canceled, so are we.
My name is Ethan Kronk,
And my name is Connor Boudreau.
and today we will be ranking the 16th placers of the new era of Survivor. We've done the 18th placers, we've done the 17th placers, and I said 18th place was the worst placement to get. And I also said 17th place was the worst placement to get. And I'd love to try to argue that 16th place is actually the worst placement to get and just continue doing that until we get to first place. But that's a tough argument to make. 16th place, you made it a little bit into the pre-merge, but you really didn't make it particularly close to the merge. At the same time, it's kind of like it's just kind of unlucky. It's just kind of unfortunate. It feels bad. So maybe that's my argument. That being said, we'll just jump right into it and talk about who we think is the worst 16th placer of the new era, Marya Sherron. Any thoughts on Marya Sherron? I remember you saying that you honestly didn't really remember that she existed, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's kind of someone that just kind of fades into the history of Survivor. I mean, coming from, early New Era season and just not being a particularly memorable player, considering they didn't really go on to make the greatest relationships, were pretty, unanimously targeted out. There was a consideration to Marianne, but really just wasn't really going to make it far in the game, regardless of what ended up happening at this tribal. Props for game awareness to play the shot in the dark. Unfortunately, it was intentionally designed to not hit very often, and through all of the instances of it being played, we've seen what, two now where it successfully worked.
Yeah, two
So
successful plays. One person played it, it hit, but they didn't receive the majority of the votes. So,
yeah, it really just hasn't come into play often, and that's kind of the design of it. So, you know, it's just not a great way to live and die by Survivor, is to live by advantages because you can't make any social connections.
especially when that advantage is one that's given to everybody at the beginning of the game. But yeah, I mean, it still takes some good like reads to know when to play your shot in the dark. But ultimately, she just like name one ally of Mariah. You can't because she didn't have any. She didn't have a single person you could say definitively was an ally for Mariah. You had Omer and Jonathan and Lindsay, who considered working with her, but they chose not to, and that's it. That was her story. She's the first person voted out of her tribe. And she just doesn't really do much. It's kind of like Nicole, except she had three whole episodes worth of time to form some sort of bonds with the tribe mates, and she doesn't. It's just it's a little bit baffling almost. Sorry, not 3 episodes, 2 episodes, but still. Um, yeah, just not much positive to say aside from the fact that she knew to play her shot in the dark when she needed to. Um, so in eighth place, we have Randen Mantalvo. Yeah, Randen Mantalvo. Could have considered putting him a little bit higher. He does get medically evacuated to really no fault of his own. When you think about the game that he played before he got medically evacuated, he had exactly one ally in the game, and it was Venus, who he immediately targeted early on and only decided to work with when they both realized that they were on the bottom and that they kind of needed each other. He finds an idol. What else can we say about Randon, Connor?
Um, I mean, unfortunately, there's not much to say. He didn't really have a long time in the game and really didn't have a situation where he was really going to go far unless he made some kind of miraculous idol play and then flip someone, which seemed kind of out of his ballpark. Socially, didn't really put himself in a great spot and would have had to, I think, heavily rely on Venus.
Yeah, and relying on the person who you just target right out of the gate, not a position that anyone wants to be in, especially when that person is Venus. I don't think Venus is not known for her forgiving gameplay, and willingness to work with people who have thrown her under the bus. That being said, he's medically evacuated. It's the end of this game, and we move on to number 7, David Voce. And this was a player that I think there's most amount of disagreement between me and Connor as to how this player should place on this list. So I'll let Connor start off because I think he's higher on Voce's game than I am.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I have for Voce in terms of his game is I feel like he's one of the more screwed over players of the new era in terms of going out so early. The poor guy gets targeted because Tiffany physically is unwilling to trust that Evie has eyes and can read. Like, the basic English comprehension just couldn't be passed on to Tiffany and be met with an understanding that this is the reality. And instead of just targeting out Xander, who had an idol that wasn't active, that they could have easily flushed without it being potentially played, Voce just goes home.
Yeah, and I'll argue that the only real ally Voce ever had in the game was Xander. He did have an ally in Evie that was considered working with him down the road, but aside from one unanimous vote that everyone was on board with, she never actually ended up wanting to work with Voce. And I think there's something to be said about Voce's social game. I don't think it was Xander. I think it was Voce who was not able to really have the social game necessary to keep Evie in their good graces. So finding himself in a position where he's on the outs in the first place, I think do have to give him a lot of flack for the fact that he ends up getting targeted over Xander is kind of unfortunate, is kind of unlucky, but it's not like he has an idol. It's not like he has the social capital with Evie or even Tiffany for that matter that I think Xander did. So I don't think had they instead targeted Xander and taken him out, that Voce would have had the run that Xander ended up having on the season. So for those reasons, I do think that the players above Voce did ultimately play better than him, ultimately might have gone home in weirder situations, or just had more just positive to say. Voce, the only real positive there is to say is that he got a little bit unlucky with how he ended up going out, and that it more so had to do with Tiffany's paranoia and lack of willingness to trust that Evie, like just like Connor said, can read, and you do have to give him a little leeway for that, but at the same time, I don't personally give him much leeway when I consider all of the reasons why he did kind of do it to himself in some ways. So
Either way, that kind of move has me as confused as a goat on AstroTurf.
yeah, well, Voce is a dead relative that will not be saying hi to Xander anytime soon. Moving on to number 6, Aysha Welch. This is a player that moved a little bit down from my rankings after me and Connor talked about things. I do think that she has a lot more potential than what she displayed in her actual game, but we did see that ultimately, she forms a really close bond with Sol. We have this weird Lavo tribe with a sort of 2-2-2 split in terms of alliances. She's not willing to turn on her closest ally, which is a fair thing to not be willing to do, to be honest. But it kind of costs her at the same time. Simultaneously, she's targeted by Rome for reasons that are a little bit silly. She's chosen to go compete in a challenge against TK for tribe supplies. She loses, which would be the expected outcome considering TK is a ripped man and Asia is kind of just a pretty average woman. But obviously she's just lying. Obviously she couldn't have lost a challenge against TK. No, that's unrealistic. She must have an advantage. We can't trust her. It's just I don't
To
know.
the
It's a weird
slightest,
situation.
to the slightest credit of Rome, though, the idea of the whole tribe supplies challenge being not everyone just either gets it or doesn't get it, and like there was an option to just lose outright was kind of new. But again, that's a very slight thing that shouldn't really affect her game at all,
Yeah.
and it ends up being one of the biggest reasons she's targeted all by Rome. So I don't know, pretty weird situation to end up in. And then I mean, yeah, overall just gets overcome by the Roman Empire and just a tough one. Wasn't willing to turn on Soul. T kind of maybe threw her a bone, but it just wasn't there.
Yeah. And I mean ultimately she doesn't even get the votes from Teeny. Well yeah, from Teeny at least. Teeny ends up voting for Soul, and then Kashawn, Genevieve, and Rome end up voting for Asia, and then Asia ends up voting for Genevieve, and then somebody I think has Seoul ends up voting for Rome, but Rome plays an idol. It's such a weird tribal council as well, for her to go out in. She does not go home unanimously, but she does go home first on her tribe, so that's another thing that you kind of have to knock her a little bit for. Either way, I mean, I don't think she's a terrible player, but I think she found herself in a lot of unlucky situations, and she didn't play them right. She could have definitely played her hand a little bit better and potentially survived, which is why she's going to be a little bit lower on this list. Moving on to a player that we really struggled to place, but we ended up putting her here at number five. We have Nneka Ejere. Do you want to talk about Nneka, Connor?
Yeah, Nneka comes into a weird spot where Nneka actually had a pretty solid position at one point in the game. And I say one point because it lasts all of, well, one round, really. They vote out Justine, Jesse, Cody, and Nneka, make that call. They pull the string. And then the next tribal council they go to, they're like, huh, we're really struggling again on this whole challenge front. And Nneka kind of dropped the ball both times. So Cody and Jesse kind of go, well, as much as we want to work with her, we might have to cut her loose. And that kind of ends up being the outcome we see on screen. Nneka gets voted out unanimously and unfortunately just could not help win a challenge for the life of her.
That's the only thing that you can really knock her for is her challenge performance, and that's just not something that I hold as um heavily as social and strategic game, which NECA's social game was so good that the two most powerful people on her tribe really, really wanted to work with her. They really, really wanted to work with her. They chose to work with her even when she was being targeted um by Noelle and Justine. They wanted to work with her even after she sort of flubbed a second challenge for their tribe. They seriously considered continuing to work with her despite it. Ultimately, they determined that they couldn't, and I think that's unfortunate for NECA because I think her social game was actually really, really solid. Which is why I do have her, um, you know, decently high on this list, despite the fact that she only survives one tribal council. She does really, really hold her tribe back in challenges, which you do have to kind of um, take into consideration. Um, but at the end of the day, her social game for me puts her here at five over some of the other players that we've talked about so far. um, Now we move on to a player who also, again, I think the theme of 16th place is that a lot of these players get taken out for weird reasons. And Helen, again, is another player. Helen Li, another player who gets taken out for just a weird, weird reason, right?
Yeah, I would say maybe it's not as weird as like some of the other reasons that we're going to get to and even previously mentioned ones, but the biggest thing that gets Helen's game cut short is getting targeted for an idol that A, she doesn't have, and B, was actually found by the person who was originally being targeted by the tribe, but for some reason couldn't have found it. The other big thing that you can kind of knock against Helen is she was kind of already not in wow, in a great space considering there was a lost vote at the tribal, meaning Helen being already on the bottom and then being blamed for something that wasn't necessarily her fault, but it just not working out in favor of numbers given the situation.
Yeah. I mean, I would say like, she finds herself in a majority. Um, that alliance of Helen, Sarah, and Carson does seem to be pretty real, but Carson always sort of had one foot in that alliance and one foot out of that, wanting to sort of also keep a bond with Carolyn and Jam Jam. He ends up fully flipping to Carolyn and Jam Jam after suspecting that Helen has the idol when she doesn't. And Carolyn actually has the idol, and Helen correctly reads that Carolyn has the idol, I believe. I think she's the only person to really correctly make that read. Um, which is a big reason why I have her a little bit higher up. And yeah, she mainly gets targeted for something that just isn't true, something that she can't disprove. that she has the idol. Like, she can try, but she can't definitively disprove that she has the idol. And Carson makes a bad read in assuming that she does. So obviously there's some fault to be placed on Helen for the way that things go, but it's really just an unfortunate situation. She gets unlucky, like a lot of these 16th placers, and that's why we have her up here. But the top three really is the definitive top three in my eyes. And rounding out the beginning of the top three, we have Sabiayh Brodrick. And honestly, like all three of these top threes had some sort of argument to be made that they could be number one, but at the end of the day, I feel pretty good about the way that we chose to rank them. Sabiayh finds herself in a really strong power position on one of the worst tribes in Survivor history. And she aligns herself with Brandon and Caleb. They take out Hannah, while considering taking out Emily. They take out Brandon, while considering taking out Emily. Little to Sabiayh know that her closest ally, Caleb, is taking Emily under her wing. They lose the third challenge. Sabiayh has a few options. She can target um, Sean, which just wouldn't make much sense at all. She could target Emily, which would be a very safe move, but she chooses instead to target Caleb, as in her eyes, the biggest threat on the tribe. This is something that almost could have worked for her because Sean was on board. Even if she didn't get Emily, she just needed Caleb and Emily to not vote together, which definitely could have been a possibility if Emily wasn't weren't able to convince Caleb of this plan that Sabiayh was hatching. So she almost gets away with it too, and she almost pulls off a really big move and puts herself in a really good position to move forward in the game, but it just doesn't quite work out for her. And I do think she's a very good player. I also want to bring up her idol, the fact that she finds it. Obviously she should have played it, but she also gets blindsided pretty hard. But her ingenuity, I'll say, to bring the idol encased in wax to tribal council and use the tribal council fire to burn that wax away and earn her idol was just phenomenal.
I mean,
I thought that was amazing.
yeah, it's a pretty memorable moment for a player that won't be that memorable in the grand scheme of Survivor things, but it's definitely a moment that can be talked about for years and years to come because when have we ever seen someone gain an idol while at tribal council?
She just sits there
I
and
mean,
she throws it in the fire and she kind of pokes around at it every once in a while. And it's just such a funny gag.
and I mean, all of that, unfortunately, just to see her go right out the door is kind of a tragic way for her to go. But I mean, it's definitely got like a memorable moment in Survivor history, and as you mentioned, Sabiayh had power at one point. Definitely put her much higher on this list than a lot of other players, solely because she was on a really good track until targeting Caleb this round. And then just Emily and Caleb's connection that was slowly hatching over multiple episodes comes to fruition.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that she ends up being the victim of that because she had no way of knowing. And I mean, really, Caleb outplays Emily. If Sabiayh was ever going to make any sort of move against Caleb, she needed to be the one to get to Emily and form that connection with her. But even given the situation, like her plan almost works. If Caleb doesn't fully trust Emily and Caleb chooses to vote for Emily at that tribal council, believing in Sabiayh that that's the plan, we end up with a 2 to 1 vote, and Caleb does go home. Uh, and I mean, it would have been more ideal if Sabiayh formed a bond with Emily to actually make that move with Emily and continue on in the game with Emily and Sean, but that's not what ends up happening, obviously. Um, she kind of gets the worst case scenario, but overall, I do think she plays a better game than the people that we've talked about so far. Um, Number two, do you wanna make the announcement?
Yeah, we unfortunately get another medevac and a player that had a very interesting run to be in the season, Jake Latimer. Now, I mean, he had a really good starting position. Alliance of four, things are looking solid. Nicole gone. Then we get Annie, gone. Nice and easy. But then all of a sudden, out from the water, a sea crate. I know. Big scary moment. Something that, according to what you hear in the episode, is apparently something of legend. This is something that I imagine will get passed down for generations. That one white guy got bit by a snake. Never happened before. Like, this is a crazy moment in Survivor history. The fact that, A, we've not had this in 49 seasons. It's their first on screen venomous snake bite. And, like,
Our first on screen our first medevac due to an animal, like, yeah, our first medevac to ever happen due to an animal related injury. Actually, there have been animal related injuries in the past, sea urchins, things like that, but this is the first one ever to actually lead to a medevac, which is kind of crazy considering how much dangerous wildlife um, Survivor players have been surrounded with, especially when you go to places like Africa, the Amazon, um, etc. You know, like in in 49 seasons, this is the first one where we get an animal actually injuring someone to the point where they have to be sent home.
and on top of that, we can argue for a while, oh, would it really matter? Was Jake really in a great spot anyways? At the end of the day, we unfortunately won't know because, you know, the guy got sent home. And thankfully, all seems well. No injuries. That man is now a father, and I'm sure he is grateful that he got the opportunity of Survivor. Just probably not very happy with, unfortunately, just how it ended.
Well, and that's the thing is like we don't know if Jake would have gone at that tribal council. You know, it could have been Jeremiah, could have been Soph, could have been probably wouldn't have been Alex, but it could have been definitely could have been Jake, from what we were shown. But we will never know. Whereas we know that everybody that we've talked about previously, aside from Randen, obviously, did go to tribal council, did get voted out in a majority vote, and that leads us to the one other player that we can't really say that about. Our number one pick for the best 16th placer in the new era history, Justin Pioppi. Oh boy, the series of unfortunate events that leads to Justin's elimination. First, he gets sent on this journey. 1 in 4 chance that Loggy chooses him to go. Then he comes to find out that this is the most bullshit journey in the history of Survivor. You are forced to play a game of complete chance, where you have a, from my understanding, 50-50 shot of either losing your vote or earning an extra vote. Justin loses his vote. So already we got a 1 in 4 chance, followed by a 1 in 2 chance. But it's okay because they're going to tribal council and Mary is the target. She's on the outs. They've got their 4 person alliance. Mary's got to go. Sorry, 3 person alliance now at this point. Mary's got to go. Either way, regardless, however many people are in the alliance. Mary plays her shot in the dark. 1 in 6 shot that it hits. What do you know? It does. So now we have a 1 in 4 chance, a 1 in 2 chance, a 1 in 6 chance. We're talking about a 2% chance, right? 2.1% chance, maybe. Something around that in that area. Doesn't really matter. 2% chance for Justin to even find himself in this situation where he doesn't have a vote. Mary is immune due to a shot in the dark. Um, and it only plays out even stupider when um, we see a revote, obviously, after the unanimous vote against Mary doesn't go through. Say votes for Justin. Justin votes for Say. So it ends in a tie. Um, sorry, no. Justin doesn't vote. Cedric votes for Say. Say votes for Justin. Cedric votes for Say. We find ourselves in a tie. Revote. Ced Say votes for Justin. Cedric votes for Say. Again, we're deadlocked. Mary cannot vote. She did not. She came into this tribal council without a vote. Justin Justin is involved in the tie and also came into this tribal council without a vote. Say is involved in the tie. What this means is that Cedric, who just voted for Say 2 times, this tribal council is now the sole decision maker, deciding who goes home. And what decision does he make between, say, the person who he just voted for twice in a row and Justin, one of his close allies, a good friend, who has for the most part been pretty honest with him, but oh, God forbid, he doesn't tell Cedric that he lost his vote. Well, Cedric decides to vote for Justin in a baffling decision. And you can say, well, Justin should have told Cedric about his lost vote, but what does Cedric do? 2 episodes later, when Bianca tells him that she's lost his vote, he votes her ass out because of it. Truly one of the most insane ways that a Survivor player has ever gone home. Truly, quite possibly one of the most unlucky Survivor players in the history of the show. And I've gone on and on and on, and I've explained kind of everything there is to explain. But I'd love to pass the mic to Connor and see if he has any big feelings about this truly stupid elimination.
I mean, look, I don't know if you can say it much better than that. It's a 2% plus Cedric chance of this instance occurring. And in all reality, you can sit there and argue back and forth about whether he should or shouldn't have shared his, you know, ability to vote, made that public knowledge. But honestly, for all we know, that meant he would have got voted out and Mary would have never had to play her shot in the dark in the first place. You know, for all we know, this is just one big game of Justin just can't win Survivor. But at the end of the day, he got voted out. Clearly, a mistake was made somewhere. I would love to know which one of the ones it was. Maybe it was he rolled the dice the wrong way. I'm gonna blame the dice. Game a chance. That's where I'm gonna point it. Because here's the thing: I wasn't even really cheering for Justin, but you feel bad for the guy after all of that has to happen for him to just get a single flip vote for him to go home. Crazy.
Yeah, and like, I don't know. It's like, where does he make this mistake? Probably when he decides to align himself with the absolute survivor sociopath that is Cedric McFadden. Um, I think that's where he made his mistake because Cedric is truly one of the most baffling players of the new era. He just makes decision after decision that you have to sit there and wonder what is this guy doing? Like, why? What is his thought process? And it's not even that he doesn't even come off. Cedric doesn't even come off as like stupid. He just comes off as like an enigma of a person doing things that no one could possibly predict. And Justin is just a victim of A, incredibly bad luck, and B, the the chaos that is Cedric McFadden. So just sheerly out of the absolute unlikelihood of Justin finding himself in the situation that he did, and then the complete unfathomable decision made by Cedric that ends up sending him home, Justin kind of has to place at the top of this list because he truly does get more unlucky than anyone else, aside from maybe Jake, right? Getting bit by that snake, I don't know what the odds are of that, but he gets so unlucky. And then, unlike Jake, I don't think there's any universe where Justin goes home if not for all this um, poor luck, right? Like, I mean, there are two people on this tribe who, by all means, should have gone home before Justin. So it's just it's just a tough situation because he's in such a good position throughout most of his tenure on Survivor. Is he a mastermind? Is he a phenomenal player by any means? No, I don't think so. I don't think Justin was going to go on to win or play the most impressive game of all time, but he certainly should have made it further than he did, all things considered. So that's why we have to have him in number one. But I don't know. Maybe you guys at home disagree. You should leave your thoughts in the comments below. Is Mariah actually the best 16th placer in Survivor New Era history or Survivor history period? I'd love to hear the perspective of someone with that opinion. But we've shared our opinions. Anything more to say, Connor?
No, I think that sums up our rankings of the players pretty well. Um, Definitely a lot of really, really weird ways that players get eliminated. 16th for the new era, which interesting coincidence. It's like almost half at this point. So makes me wonder what weird random way is Cerie somehow going home in season 50 at 16th place?
Don't will that into existence. That's that's scary.
I mean, what else is going to happen?
Yeah, fair enough. Well, join us next time where we're going to talk about the 15th placers. And join us for episode whatever of our season 50 podcast where we'll be talking about why Suri came in 16th place and ended her Survivor career with a whimper. That being said, that's all we really have to say. So the pod has spoken.